Happy Sunday, guys. This content's going to be a little bit longer because there's a lot to say. It's not always about the views, but here it goes. So, I, like most people, are focused on the stock market. And the reason I'm focused on the stock market is, as an investor, I'm always looking at the best risk reward profile on any asset class. And right now, with the S&P 500 being down nearly 10% from its all-time highs, I'm going to look at that and compare it to, from a relative value basis, Pokemon, which has held its ground, and think maybe right now the S&P 500 actually looks more attractive than investing in Pokemon. All that being said, I am definitely not sitting on the sidelines. For example, I bought a very sizable position on prismatic ETBs yesterday. Significant discount to where it was trading before all this inventory drop hit the market. And that the way I look at that is, if I'm going to be investing in Pokemon right now, I want to be invested in S tier sets, the higher quality stuff. And that kind of also brings me to another point. If you're sitting here worried and you think you need to sell, humbly, I'd be looking at selling things that are lower quality in your portfolio, things that have underperformed the bull market run we've seen in the last, call it couple years, and, either redeploy it in those S tier set type ideas, or maybe even look at redeploying it towards something like the stock market. Now, Pokemon is an alternative investment. I put some content out on that yesterday, and the reason that's important is it's a good risk management or diversification tool in your portfolio. It is not supposed to move in lockstep with other asset classes. Namely, we're talking about the S&P 500. It's not going to move 1-to-1. So if the stock market goes down 10%, I wouldn't expect Pokemon to go down 10% as well. It may very well hold its ground and outperform, even if it's slightly negative. One goes down more than the other, kind of, so to speak. And I've also mentioned catalysts. I said that we would need multiple catalysts to drive our market down. We are kind of getting there in the Pokemon space, and I do expect to maybe start seeing some pressure on price action across the board. That brings me to another point. If you are a singles collector, those are inherently more volatile as an investment strategy within the Pokemon space. And maybe instead of focusing on singles right now, you could either focus on the higher quality slabs that are the most popular and have the best chance of holding ground, or you could, for a brief bit, redeploy into the more conservative plays, like in sealed product, which is what I focus on, and focus on those S tier sets like Ascended Heroes and Prismatic. I mean, those are two of my bigger positions. I'm not shilling. I believe in them. I have a lot of conviction. And, if anyone's ever invested in the markets and has some, broader knowledge, typically when there's a bear market, you want to focus on the higher quality things within that asset class. So that would be your Prismatics and Ascended Heroes. I would also say that Prismatic, for example, is a good leading indicator of what we can expect, or Ascended Heroes, of price action over the foreseeable future or the short-term future. And if that, continues to trend down with all the supply and it doesn't have a quick V-shaped recovery, that's going to catch my attention. That's going to tell me that even the better, higher quality stuff that people have the highest conviction in isn't rebounding as quickly as we were accustomed to. That's a meaningful observation, and I would definitely be thinking about what that means and how I'm going to move and invest going forward. So I also wanted to say, I'm going to drop in the comments, this is another content that I've mentioned, is institutional investors in our space. So think like Kevin O'Leary, and you've probably heard some chatter about him and getting into Pokemon and more broadly baseball cards and basketball cards. Those investors are considered very sophisticated investors. And, the article that I'm about to post is talking about just that they're seeing more and more institutional-like investors looking at Pokemon as a viable investment strategy, especially as it pertains to allocating toward alternative investments in people's portfolio. And if this is kind of going over your head, I put some content out on all of this, including, for example, yesterday, the alternative investment little piece that I dropped how much you'd allocate to an alternative investment strategy, how Pokemon fits into that. Those are all things that, if you're just trying to have the best risk adjusted performance, and also, and the way to do that is to have good risk management skills. And it's important to note, like, Pokemon, again, is not highly correlated with other asset classes. So from that standpoint alone, Pokemon investing should still be a part of your strategy. But again, you always have to be looking at other asset classes and from a relative value standpoint, and the S&P 500 is starting to look more attractive. And that could move the needle where we start seeing prices stagnate or even start trending downward in the Pokemon space. Not saying it's going to happen. I'm also not saying I'm not investing, because I am. You can consider dollar cost averaging as a strategy in any of these asset classes. You don't want to catch a falling knife, right? Like, that's never a good strategy. Nobody knows where the bottom's going to be. You need to be an oracle for that. So longer content here. Again, just to quickly recap what I've been talking about. I've been focusing on sealed product in the Pokemon space, the higher quality S tier type sets, and still investing. And I will continue to dollar cost average, but I am also looking at other asset classes like the S&P 500 now. I think we're also starting to get enough catalysts to potentially see that large shift of the trend as your friend has been up. We might start seeing it stagnate or go down, and that's important. And again, the way to kind of see how that's going to happen, I'd be looking at like a prismatic. If that struggles to rebound after the supply hit the market, that's going to be troublesome in my mind. So those are all things that I'm considering. So I am still investing. I'm just investing in a very specific way, my highest conviction ideas. And I'm also looking at other asset classes, namely the S&P 500, to provide maybe potential better relative value. And also keeping in mind that if you're panicked over there, I gave some ideas to sell sort of your lower conviction parts of your portfolio. And also just take a breath and understand that Pokemon investing is an alternative investment strategy. And that tends to be a good thing if you're trying to diversify your risk as an overall part of your portfolio, because it's not supposed to move in lockstep with the S&P 500, for example. So a lot of things to digest in this longer video. I apologize. I usually try to keep to a short format, but this one I think needed a little bit more dialogue. And if you've watched this far in, if you have questions, just leave a comment and I'll try to address it. But that's how I'm looking at things. And also keep an eye out for that link that I'm going to drop that talks about institutional investors entering our space, because that is a positive catalyst. Just to be clear, obviously having more money in our space, especially institutional investors are large people. I mean, they can move markets on any single item because they have so much capital to deploy. And if they do continue and they're looking at it like I am and saying it's an alternative investment strategy and it's actually helping diversify my risk, they may continue to pile into Pokemon versus the S&P 500, at least for now. And again, if the S&P 500 continues to drop a lot, that may change, but that's a positive catalyst. Again, the negative catalysts are just kind of common sense with the war, oil, all that stuff. Those are topical and you should be notating that. And yeah, that's it. A longer video. Please like and subscribe, leave comments if you want some clarification or don't understand some of the jargon I just threw out there. I'm just trying to be as helpful as possible. Thanks.